Europe, 1943. The war had long ceased to be romantic. For German soldiers, the sky became a source of fear. They were accustomed to the roar of engines, the scream of diving Mustangs, the shells that sliced through the air. But in those days, when the Americans began using a new aircraft, the sky changed. It began to drone as if thunder itself had descended to earth. The Germans laughed at first. In headquarters, they joked that the Americans had made a flying wardrobe. Fact, clumsy, heavy, too big to be a fighter and too small to be a bomber, wrote the German newspapers. But soon these jokes disappeared. The first reports from frontline units came from France. They spoke of some new machine that wouldn't fall even after a direct hit, of an aircraft that returned to its own, burning but alive. The Americans called it the P-47 Thunderbolt. It was heavy, crude, and stubborn, like America itself. Its engine roared so that it shook the ground. The Germans nicknamed it Jabbo, hell from the sky. When it appeared over a column, soldiers didn't look up. They knew it was useless. The Thunderbolt wasn't born for beauty. Its body was solid metal, armor, engine, and fury. It could carry almost a ton of bombs and 6 heavy machine guns. When they fired, the air itself burned. One volley turned a truck into a cloud of dust, a tank into a scorched husk. That spring, Germany learned for the first time what it meant to be powerless against the sky. One day, over the small French town of Argenteuil, a German column was moving along the highway. An engine droned in the sky, and the sound was unlike anything else. Dense, guttural, as if the air itself was compressed by its weight. The soldiers looked up and saw a silver body gleaming in the sun. It flew low, almost touching the treetops. The first shot from an anti-aircraft gun missed. The second hit the wing, but the plane didn't deviate. The Thunderbolt passed over the road, and everything was blinded by flashes. Metal thundered. Vehicles exploded one after another. Bodies flew into the air. The sound of the machine guns wasn't a crackle. It was like the beating heart of the war itself. One pass, and an entire company vanished. When the smoke cleared, charred ruins remained on the road. And among them, a strange silence. The Germans said later that this sound couldn't be forgotten. After the Thunderbolt, it seemed to them that the sky no longer belonged to men. The Americans also didn't immediately understand that they had created more than just an airplane. They had made a monster that did not forgive mistakes. Its pilots called themselves stone executioners. They knew, if you sit in a Thunderbolt, you can enter hell and return. Among them was one pilot, Captain William Hansen, young, 23 years old, with a face perpetually squinting from the sun. His machine bore the name Lucky Lady. He had already flown dozens of missions, but that day fate had prepared a special one for him. Their squadron received orders to destroy a column of German tanks near the coast. A simple mission. Only the German artillery in that area was famous for its accuracy. William sat in the cockpit, tightened his straps, ran his hand over the instrument panel. The engine trembled beneath his feet, the heart of the machine. When he took to the air, the sun was just rising over the fields of France. The radio crackled. The leader spoke calmly. Hold formation. Work fast. They flew at low altitude. Below, the roofs of houses, rivers, roads flashed by. Then, flashes. Anti-aircraft guns. The first shells landed behind, then closer. One hit the tail. The plane shuddered but didn't slow down. William heard a cry over the radio, "Hold on, Lucky!" and answered only briefly, "I'm okay." He headed for the target. When his machine gun spoke, everything around turned into a storm. German vehicles burned, infantry scattered. One shell hit the fuselage directly. Flames spread through the cockpit. He saw the fuel tanks of other planes tearing apart, the sky turning into smoke. But Lucky Lady held on. When he pulled her out of the dive, the wing was holed, the instruments melted, but the engines still droned. 20 minutes later, Hansen landed the plane at the base. The mechanics who ran up to him couldn't believe their eyes. The tail was held on by 3 bolts. The skin was charred, bullet holes by the dozen. But the machine stood. The next day, it took to the air again. The Germans later wrote, "We shoot, but they don't fall." And this became the new reality. The sky now spoke American. After that sortie, when Hansen landed the riddled plane, his photo made the rounds of all American bases in Europe. The pilots laughed. "Lucky Lady's back from hell." The mechanics stood nearby, looked at the hole in the fuselage, and shook their heads. How did this pile of metal even stay in the air? Hansen himself didn't smile. He just sat on the wing, smoked silently, and listened to the engine, covered in soot and oil, still quietly groaning, as if Ali. The command decided that the Thunderbolt had officially proven its reputation. Now they were thrown where it was toughest. They flew over bridges, trains, tank columns, scorching everything in their path. Soon the Germans learned to recognize the sound of its engine. It could be heard dozens of kilometers away, a dull roar, as if someone was rolling a steamroller across the sky. When this sound appeared in the sky, German soldiers abandoned their vehicles, ran into the forest, froze under trees. Wehrmacht reports stated, "The appearance of the Thunderbolt causes panic among the troops. Firing at it is ineffective." Hansen became the symbol of the squadron. Every new pilot listened to his stories as if they were legends. But he himself spoke simply. The Thunderbolt doesn't forgive fear. It only flies with those who are ready to die. His Lucky Lady became something like a partner to him. When he sat in the cockpit, he would stroke the instrument panel and whisper, "Well, girl, another day in hell." In the spring of 1944, they were given a mission that would later be called Insane. A German train was moving through the Loire Valley. Fuel tankers, tanks, anti-aircraft guns, a whole armored snake stretching for kilometers. The task? Destroy everything. The enemy already knew the Thunderbolts were near and was prepared. Dozens of guns stood along the road. The sky was covered with smoke. The chances of returning were slim, but Hansen told his men, "We don't return until everything is burning." They came from the west, against the sun. The Germans fired immediately. The whole horizon flashed. Shells tore the air. Bullets rattled against the fuselage. The first Thunderbolt caught fire, went down. The second exploded in the sky. But Hansen didn't turn away. He went straight into the inferno, pressing the plane to the ground to spoil the anti-aircraft gunner's aim. The heat in the cockpit was like a furnace. The windshield was covered in soot. He saw only flashes and shadows. When he reached the target, he pressed the trigger, and 6 machine guns thundered, as if 6 beasts were roaring at once. German trucks exploded. Tankers blew apart. The ground shook. Everything burned. Metal, earth, air. He felt the machine vibrating but didn't let go. One shell hit the wing. Another pierced the fuel tank. Flames spread under the seat. He knew he wouldn't make it back to base, but kept firing until the ammunition ran out. He pulled back on the stick, brought the machine up. Below, solid fire. The train was gone. The radio was silent. The others were either shot down or had lost contact. Suddenly, a hoarse voice in the headphones. "Lucky? Alive?" "So far, yes." "Your tail's on fire." "I know." He looked back. Flame licked the fuselage, but the controls held. The engine roared like a beast that didn't want to die. When he crossed the front line, the flame had almost reached the fuel tank. Fuel was running out. He saw the airfield, a small strip amid green fields. The radio was dead. He began his descent. The landing gear wouldn't extend. He landed on the belly. Sparks, smoke, a crash. The plane slid along the ground and stopped. Mechanics ran up and couldn't believe anyone inside was alive. The canopy opened and Hansen emerged, covered in soot, with burns on his hands. He sat right down on the ground and said, "Thunderbolt hasn't said its last word yet." The next morning he was back in the sky, in a new plane but with the same name, Lucky Lady 2. At headquarters, the Germans were again sending reports. "These Americans don't die, their planes are immortal." And somewhere between these words and the roar of his engine, a legend was born, one that even the Luftwaffe pilots themselves stopped believing. When they heard the low, heavy sound over the front line, everyone knew it's not a man coming, it's thunder coming. The summer of 1944 became a time when the very air in Europe trembled from the roar of engines. American Thunderbolts circled over France like heavenly sledgehammers, striking anyone who tried to move by day. The Germans no longer risked moving equipment in sunlight. The roads emptied, trains stood in forests, and soldiers whispered, "We don't move until dark." This fear was a silent admission. No one could oppose the Thunderbolt. Captain Hansen now flew almost every day. His face was tanned by the sun, his eyes always looked into the distance, as if he was looking through the war. Lucky Lady 2 was his home, his destiny. He began every sortie the same way. He sat in the cockpit, closed his eyes, and said, "One more time, and home." But he never returned home. America was too far away, and the sky of Europe didn't let go of those who had tamed the thunder. In August, he was given the most dangerous assignment. He had to destroy a fuel depot near the city of Rouen, right under the noses of the German anti-aircraft gunners. Intelligence warned, chances are slim. He only replied, "Thunderbolt doesn't fly for chances." A squadron of 8 machines took off early in the morning. The air was clear, the sun hadn't yet risen over the horizon. The radio was silent, only the drone of engines. When they reached the target, the city was already waking up. The Germans opened fire, and the sky flashed like heated glass. The first tracers passed by, but then they hit the lead plane's wing. The plane caught fire, and the pilot shouted over the radio, "Continue, I'll distract them," and went down, straight into the anti-aircraft guns. It lasted seconds. An explosion blinded everyone. Hansen cursed, pressed the plane to the ground, and went straight for the depots. He saw the air cracking from the explosions, smoke obscuring everything. The instruments shook. The temperature needle jumped into the red zone. He didn't think, he acted. Opened the bays, released the bombs, turned, and climbed. The explosion was such that even the ground at the airfield shook afterwards. A fire cloud rose hundreds of meters, and then the tankers detonated. A pillar of smoke rose over Rouen, visible for dozens of kilometers. But Hansen didn't rejoice. His plane had taken a direct hit. The radio was silent, fuel was running out, the right wing was burning. He gritted his teeth, shut down the right engine, and flew on one. Anti-aircraft guns fired from below. German fighters rose from behind. One of them, a Messerschmitt Bf 109, cut him off. A moment, and tracers streaked the air. Bullets pierced the cockpit. One grazed his shoulder, another passed by his head. Hansen felt blood flowing down his arm, but didn't let go of the yoke. He knew that if he lost altitude, he wouldn't return. He sharply pulled back on the stick, lifted the machine up, rolled over the wing, and ended up behind the German. All the power of the Thunderbolt was revealed in that moment. He pressed the trigger, and 6 machine guns spoke. The German plane flared up like a torch. Hansen saw the pilot eject, and for a moment even felt pity for him. But a second later, pain overwhelmed him again. The fuel was almost gone. When he finally saw the front line, the sky was already pink from the sunset. The plane was losing altitude. The engine was choking. He switched on emergency power, but the instrument needles didn't move. "Hold on, girl," he whispered. The machine answered with a dull roar. He covered the last kilometers almost on inertia. Fields, the airfield flashed beneath him. He reduced speed and landed the plane right on the dirt. A thunderous impact. The wing tore off. The fuselage slid along the ground, flipped over, and stopped. Mechanics ran up, pulled him from the cockpit. He was alive, barely breathing, but his eyes were open. His first question was, "Did the depot burn?" The commander nodded. Then he just said, "Thunderbolt doesn't let you down," and lost consciousness. The next day he woke up in the hospital. His pilots stood around him, silent as stones. No one said a word. Hansen looked at the ceiling and thought that maybe the war would end someday. But until then, as long as people kept sending the Thunderbolt into the sky, the thunder would not subside. The war was drawing to a close, but the sky still droned. In the spring of 1945, the Americans were already in Germany. City after city, road after road, and every kilometer was accompanied by a familiar sound. P-47 Thunderbolts now flew almost without opposition, hunting the remnants of columns, covering the troops, returning the land from under iron and fear. The Germans knew this sound, heavy, muffled, as if not an engine, but the storm itself was rolling over the roofs. When it appeared, no one fired upwards. Everyone knew it was useless. Captain Hansen left the hospital with a bandaged shoulder and immediately asked to be returned to duty. The commander tried to object. "You've done your part. Rest." But he only replied, "Thunderbolt doesn't rest." He was allowed to fly again. The familiar name appeared on the fuselage of the new machine, Lucky Lady 3. The final mission came suddenly. Intelligence reported remnants of a German column were moving through the Rhine Valley trying to escape into the mountains. It was the end, but everyone wanted to finish the war standing. The morning was gray, cold. The air smelled of fuel and rain. The squadron rose into the sky as if for the last time. No one spoke. Only the engines droned like a prayer. They reached the target at dawn. The road below twisted like a black ribbon. The vehicles moved in a tight formation. Hansen saw them and understood. This was his finale. He keyed the mic. "Guys, let's do this nicely," and went down. The earth rushed to meet him. Bullets and shrapnel rang against the fuselage, but the Thunderbolt dove like an arrow. The first volleys hit the target precisely. The tankers exploded. Flame rose into the sky. He passed over the road, feeling the heat even through the armor, and leveled the machine. The others followed, finishing off what remained. Trails of smoke circled in the sky. It ended as quickly as it began. As they left, Hansen looked back. Below, the road was blazing, and a pillar of black smoke burst from the fire, as if the war itself was breathing its last. He said into the microphone, "This is the end." No one answered. The answer was only the roar of the engines carrying them home. A week later, the war ended. America celebrated, the pilots laughed. But in every laugh there was fatigue. At the airfield near Paris, Hansen stood by his plane stroking the metal with his palm. On the fuselage, marks from hits, cracks, soot. He said quietly, "Thank you, girl." Then he placed his helmet on the wing and walked away without looking back. Years later, his name became a legend. Old photographs stood in museums, with captions beneath. P-47 Thunderbolt, the plane everyone feared. Mechanics told that when Hansen flew, the engine droned differently, as if it knew who was in the cockpit. In the 1960s, a German veteran, now gray-haired and nearly blind, stood by an exhibit of this plane in the USA. He was silent for a long time, then said to a journalist, "When we heard that sound, we knew the end was near. We didn't hate those pilots, we just knew. Man is powerless against thunder." And so the legend closed the circle. The machines long ago turned into metal, the pilots into names, but the sound of the Thunderbolt remained in the world's memory. That roar, which made the earth tremble, became a reminder that strength lies not in beauty, not in speed, but in resilience. America built a plane that was not afraid to die, and in that was the whole essence of that time. Years later, when the sun set behind an old airfield in England, one of the restored Thunderbolts took to the sky on a display flight. The crowd froze. The roar of the engine rolled over the field, and someone below whispered, "There it is, America's thunder." And in that moment, it seemed as if time itself was paying tribute to those who flew, burned, and still returned, to those who made the sky a symbol of will, to those who proved, even when the world is crumbling, there are machines and people who cannot be broken.